Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar presentation discussing generations in the workplace. If this is your first webinar, welcome, and I would like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Amanda Henty, and I'm the Alumni Professional Development Coordinator here at St. Louis University. I started my role in July of 2015, and since then I have been working on establishing and strengthening alumni professional development programming, and this webinar series is a part of that initiative. And now I would like to introduce our speaker today, Diane Devine. Diane is one of our career counselors here at SLU. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Amanda. So we're going to go ahead and talk about multiple generations in the workplace today because it's important to highlight the strengths and skills that everybody brings to the table. Admittedly, as I was talking to Amanda about this presentation ahead of time, we did talk about how important it is to look at the individual first, and then we can take into account all of the other factors to make the most out of the dynamics within each of our offices. Because I do think when we work together and we pull on each other's strengths, we tend to make for a much stronger workforce and definitely a much stronger work environment. We'll go ahead and get started. So first, defining the generations themselves. When it comes to the research I did, it seems that we are generally fascinated by how we all came together and contribute. And the information is incredibly conflicting, even given the years of each of these generations. So we define these generations by years that we are born. So those are the birth years. Traditionalists tend to be born 1922 to 1943, for example, but that gets really fuzzy. I saw one that said 1910 to 1945. So taking into account the blurry lines between each of these generational divides, we have generally heard of all of these generations: the traditionalists, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the I generation is what we're now talking about. So we're going to go through and talk about each of these individually, talk about what helped form some of these generations, and then how we all come together to make for a stronger workforce. There are still plenty of traditionalists in the workforce, and I do have some pictures included here to show you some examples of people that are still getting it done out there. Traditionalists are also called the greatest generation, the veterans, the silent generation. Some of the different things, they were formed by the Great Depression of the 1930s and brought us out of World War II, making the United States a world power. Speaking of the United States, these generations are defined from Western cultural perspective, so keep that in mind as well. Traditionalists were raised sitting around a radio listening to stories such as The Shadow, Dick Tracy, and our Miss Brooks. They were raised by parents who spoke of delayed gratification with sayings such as, "A penny saved is a penny earned." I'm sure we've heard that one. "Don't count your chickens before they're hatched," and "Don't judge a book by its cover." The military way of doing things made its way into the workplace with this generation. Clearly, with that more military background from this generation, they brought to the workplace more of a hierarchical style. It was a time of conformity ruled. It's a time where conformity ruled and women and minorities did not share space with the men. Women were supposed to be at home cooking and cleaning. So thinking of some of the TV shows, Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, are good examples of this generation growing up. But this generation also contributed NASA and vaccines such as polio, TB, tetanus, and whooping cough. Next up, we're talking about the baby boomers. The baby boomers grew up in post-World War II prosperity and surrounded by civil movements. They entered the workforce with a sense of optimism and rebellion, valuing equal opportunities, teamwork, community, and open communication. Boomers actively declared a higher priority for work over personal life. They raised the me generation of millennials, and 63% plan to work part-time in retirement, partly because of their work defines them and partly because of their live to work mentality. You see a few of the boomers represented here on the page: Oprah, George Clooney, but we also have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are both boomers. And of course, they had a tremendous impact on computers and technology. Next up, we move over to the Gen Xers, the forgotten sandwich generation between the baby boomers and the millennials. So we've got this very large group of baby boomers, and we've got this very large group of millennials. The Gen Xers represent a smaller portion of the population. We grew up in households where both parents worked, so this is known as the latchkey generation. From being latchkey children, they were taught to be wary and cautious, sometimes given credit for creating the work-life balance with a work-to-live attitude. The Gen Xers are set apart from the previous and former generations by their independence in the workplace. Once heard that this is the first generation to not do better financially than their parents. So kind of interesting, the boomers came out of that prosperity from the World War II, and Gen Xers struggled to achieve the same prosperity that their parents did. All right, Generation Y. I feel like the majority of the buzz these days comes from the millennials. And the Generation Y was influenced by 9/11, social media. They have more of a global perspective, and they are known to be confident, approval-seeking, and creative. I know that the recent information that I kind of heard about this generation is that they were lazy and self-centered. But I have to say, when I, as a Generation Xer, was entering the workforce, the same was said about me. So this goes back to that overgeneralizations, and I do think that we tend to get caught up in that. So we're going to start to hear that the iGeners are the ones that are lazy and self-centered and difficult to work with. But I think that sometimes those pieces come more from our age and our inexperience in the workplace and less from our generational definitions. Gen Ys grew up in a turbulent economy surrounded by unprecedented terrorism and quickly improving technology to capture it all. The millennials were sheltered by their parents. We've all heard of the helicopter parents. They want recognition for their accomplishments. They value achievements, education, competition, attention, and globalism. Raised in a time where children are given participation trophies and were praised whether they really earned it or not. Millennials view job career as a means to making dreams come true and meeting personal goals. Now on to Gen Z, more commonly referred to as iGen. iGeners are true digital natives. My kiddos are iGeners, and I can tell you that they know their way around an iPad a whole lot better than I do. They grew up after the advent of home computers and the internet. They don't remember life before laptops, cell phones, or iPods. These things have always been there for them. They have high expectations. Because of the constant stream of information and entertainment at their fingertips, they're used to higher standards. Gen Xers grew up thinking 50 cable channels were amazing, while millennials really loved dial-up internet. Gen Z members are used to always on internet and making high-definition videos on their phones. Gen Z is also very global and even more accepting than the previous generations. Diversity is a default setting for Gen Z. Older generations may notice when the room is diverse, but Gen Z will notice if it's not diverse enough. All right, so now on to a little more statistics for you. So we talked about the fact that the traditionalists are still represented in the workforce. It is a small percentage at this point. We are starting to see a lot of the baby boomers retire. So we're starting to get into that second tier generation that's even starting to move out of the workforce. But as we just talked about, those baby boomers are going to stick around as long as they can based on their values and their career interests. Gen X is a smaller generation in the population overall. And so Gen Y has in fact surpassed the previous generations. As of 2015, they were the largest representatives in the workforce. And Gen Z, we're just starting to see them emerge into the workforce. So we're just starting to get a few of those representatives. And like I said, I predict we're going to start talking about how lazy they are. Got to give these people a break, though. It is part of learning how to get into the workforce. All right, now as we look on the job, what does this look like? So you'll notice I don't have Gen Z represented here. Like I mentioned, they're just starting to get out there. So I don't know that we really know what that's going to look like exactly yet, but we can talk about the other 4 generations and how to work together. Traditionalists in the workforce are loyal to their employers and expect the same in return. As long as you work with them, they will be loyal to the company. They possess superb interpersonal skills. They like the personal touch. They like the personal thank you notes when we talk about that in career, thanking people for interviews and whatnot. They believe promotions, raises, and recognitions should come from job tenure. They do appreciate when their work is respected, but they like that more on an individual basis rather than global recognition. They measure work ethic on timeliness, productivity, and not drawing attention. They follow rules well, but want to know procedures. They tend to be frustrated by what they see as a lack of discipline, respect, logic, and structure, especially in the workplace. Oop, got ahead of myself. All right, baby boomers in the workplace. They want to hear that their ideas matter. Their careers define them. Their work is important to them. They get frustrated by silly routines. They expect their work and themselves to matter. They want to know the responsibility that they're having. Their responsibility helps others. They don't take criticism well, and they do need flexibility. They expect their work and themselves to matter. That's the bottom line with the baby boomers. Gen X, they actually account for 51% of leadership in companies right now. So keeping in mind that they are not the largest generation out there in the workforce, but they are currently at a point where they do account for most of the leadership. Generation X is the forgotten sandwich generation. They have more of an idealistic approach. They tend to be a little bit more independent and are less encouraged or less confident to voice their opinions. So tend to be a little bit quieter, still focused, still, like I said earlier, kind of helped with that work-life balance movement. And then finally, the Gen Y, the millennials. This is when I feel like we really felt or saw a switch. And again, maybe it was just because of the large numbers in this generation, but they like a team-oriented workplace. I feel like this is when we started to see more of the open concepts within offices. They want to work with bright, creative people. They're competitive. They expect to be treated respectfully. They provide engaging experiences and develop transferable skills. It's important to them to grow their teams and networks with great care. Their personal lives need to be recognized as well in the workforce. So that's something that they bring into the workforce, whereas the traditionalists were quite the opposite in very much keeping work and life separate. When we start to come together, it became really clear that every one of us really appreciates a pat on the back for work well done. It looks a little bit different for each of the generations. And again, this is where I feel like it's so important to talk about individuals and personalities and getting to know the people on your team so that you can recognize them in the way that they appreciate. Overall, traditionalists bring value to the workplace with their experience, knowledge. They're disciplined, they're dependable, they're hardworking and loyal. Baby boomers are anxious to please. They want to make an impact, good at seeing the big picture. I did find a lot of similarities between the baby boomers and the millennials as I was going through some of this. And again, a lot of the millennials were raised by baby boomers. Gen Xers do adapt well to change. They have more of a consumer mentality. And these last two generations, Gen X and Millennials, are highly educated, as will the iGens be highly educated. Things to keep in mind as we all work together. Traditionalists think that work is not supposed to be fun. They follow the rules well, but want to know the procedures. They tend to be conservative in the workplace, and they like the personal touch, as I mentioned earlier. Baby boomers want to hear that their ideas matter, their careers define them, and their work is important to them. They expect their work and themselves to matter. They do well in teams and are motivated by their responsibility to others. Gen Xers want independence in the workplace and informality. Give them time to pursue other interests and allow them to have a little fun at work. You can see where some of these things start to clash with each other. And so finding a way to compromise that in your own office or to appease everyone can be the challenge. Millennials like teamwork oriented workplaces as well. They expect to be treated respectfully, and they are determined to change the world for the better. Overall, with all of the research that I did on these generations, for me, and maybe it's my Gen Xer influences, but it comes down to the individual. In career, we take a look at people's personality types as it relates to different career fields. And looking at it from that perspective, I feel like it's important to look at everyone's strengths, skills, and accomplishments. I think that it's fun to take a look back at the different generations and see what's influenced them and what they bring to the table, because it certainly has an impact on their own mindset. And then again, strategizing. So the baby boomers and the millennials like to work on teams, coming together as teams to definitely make sure that we are using everybody's strengths to the best of their abilities on our team is what's important. And getting everyone's input is going to help you get there. So remember to be respectful, appreciative, and encouraging on the team, and you will have great success. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to let you know that Career Services is here to help with any of your career related needs. So you can reach out to us. Our contact information is on the website. My name is Diane Devine, and our number is 314 977 2828. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for joining us today. We hope this information was really helpful for you all, and I hope that you're able to join us for any future presentations that we have. Have a great day, everybody.